Right, I'm going to get started. And then people can join or they can watch later. So, downward facing dog, one of the powerhouses of yoga and also what can be an incredibly restorative pose, even though it can seem to be very challenging initially for a beginner. I find that it is a pose I come back to again and again each day and absolutely love being in it. So I'm not going to waste too much time here. I'm going to get to the mat. So hopefully you can see me. Get the hair up. I'm wearing my intentionally very brightly coloured leggings, which hopefully you can see. So I'm going to start in child's pose. Big toes to touch, legs, knees out wide on the mat, arms out in front of you. This is a lovely pose to transition from or out of and into downward dog. Child's pose, as we all know, is incredibly restorative. Forehead down on mat. Whenever I come into child's pose, I just want to stay here, but I'm not going to because that's not the aim of today. However, very quickly about child's pose, it's a wonderful one to spend some time in every day because it gives you effortless rest. It rests your abdominal muscles, your core, it relaxes your shoulders, deep pressure touch, which is proven to be very inhibiting of the fight and flight. So forehead, deep pressure touch, brilliant. Opens in the groin, space in the lower back. And because it's quite an inward focused pose, but in a very safe way, it's very quietening of the mind. So that's child's pose. And then to come up into your downward facing dog, I then come through my tabletop, which again, I'm not going to spend any time in today, but I transition from tabletop into downward dog by tucking my toes under and coming back and up. So the part of my body that I'm focusing on initially is my hands, my wrists, and lifting away out of my wrists. I can feel my core already starting to engage as I push back, bringing my sit bones towards my ankles. My core is engaged even here. My breastbone, my sternum is lifted. And then I can feel my legs, my hamstrings, my quads engaged as I go to lift my knees up. Lift those knees up, so you can practice that. What's also good, if you come back into your tabletop, is just practicing lifting the knees, lifting just a couple of inches off the ground. It will help to strengthen your core. So coming back, lifting those knees, and then the movement is up and back. So up and back. You want the weight to be immediately taken from your wrists, and you can see my movement here. And I keep initially a really good healthy bend in my knees. You can keep that healthy bend in your knees. It will give you a lovely space and relief to your lower back. It also is great to have bent knees if you've got tight hammies. And the reason for that being, if you've got tight hamstrings and you go to try and reach the soles of your feet towards the mat, which you're often told to do in yoga classes, what can happen is by stretching the hammy, one, you can tear your hammy. If you're feeling tightness right up near your glutes here, then definitely bend your knees because you want to bring that stretch lower down. But also what will happen is your pelvis will tilt forward, and if you can see what's happening, there's a curve, a bend appearing in my back, which is not what we want. We're looking for a neutral spine. So bending the knees, pushing weight away from the arms, externally rotating the tops of the arms, so you'll feel your shoulder blades kind of come together. Give the head a good shake. Release the jaw. And and draw the head and the ears away from the shoulders. Take a glance to your hands, to the space between your index finger and thumb, because it's quite easy to roll onto the outward part of your wrists. So you want the weight to be evenly distributed. And then pushing up and back, come to your hip creases, so here. So you want to imagine, if I was with you, I would be taking a belt and I would be putting it in my hip crease, and I would be standing behind you and lifting like this. So you feel as though you're lifting, but again, be watchful that your pelvis doesn't tip forward. So it's that lift up and back rather than directly up like this. Up and back. I would also be placing a hand on the mid part of the back here. So hang on, down like this. So it would be more like that, and I'd be pushing up and back, up and back. So those are the two feelings of where you want to bring your mind to reference. So downward dog is very restorative, as I was saying. It's restorative because it floods, it's an inversion, and it floods the brain with fresh oxygenated blood, so it's very hydrating of the brain and it's very cooling. So when you've got that mental fatigue, that mental fog, it's a really great pose to come into. We've been talking about chronic pain this week. If you've got blocks, you can use books, you can use cushions. What can make it doubly restorative, particularly if you're suffering from some kind of pain, or for ladies out there, it's that time of the month. You can place blocks or books under your hands sorry, I should call these bricks because it's a bit confusing. Bricks or books, and then a block or a cushion or cushions mounted up, and you can come into, that is just the most relaxing sensation. Because what that does is the deep pressure touch here almost is sending a message directly down my spine, and I can just feel myself just calming. It also makes it a lot easier if you do have those tight hamstrings, because what happens in downward dog is you're stretching the erector spinae, so you're really stretching the back muscles. You're stretching your latissimus dorsi and your shoulder cuff here. You're lifting at your sternum, so in a way it's energizing and invigorating without being overpowering, because you're lifting at the sternum. It also stretches your hamstrings, so it really does strengthen. It's a whole body workout in one pose. It's like the whole of yoga, just doing one pose, which is really powerful. Okay, good. I've still got a few minutes left, so I'm just going to go through that again so you can see what I did. So I started in child's pose. I lifted myself up and came through tabletop. Again, I'm not going to stay here for too long. We can run through this another time. Then I tucked the toes under and I lifted my knees first, so I'm pushing, I can feel myself. So you're rooting down through your hands, but you're using that rooting to rise up and away from the wrists. So I'm feeling myself as I'm lifting up. I almost feel the energy going up my arms, down into my core, and lighting each part of my body as it gets there. It's like sparking and igniting. So I'm engaging the core, igniting the legs, lifting the knees, and lifting myself up and back and straight into those bended knees, giving the head a good shake, rolling the shoulders out and down the back, lifting the sternum very subtly. I can bend one leg and then the other. As I said, you can stay here. This is how I practiced downward dog for months when I had a back injury. I just stayed like this. You can, if you've got good stretchy hamstrings, you can bring the soles of your feet towards the mat, but just be mindful that you're not bringing that pelvis forward. Take your gaze to your knees, just ensure they're not collapsing in, and your hands' weight is evenly distributed. And there you have it. A beautiful, restorative, powerful, energizing pose that can be used wherever you are at any time. And remember the bricks or books to make it even more restorative at those times when you're just feeling you really need that opportunity to melt, then you can. And one last thing, I've got a chair here. So this downward dog can also be practiced using a chair. So for those, again, with chronic pain who find coming to the floor is too painful, chair, back of the chair, arms onto chair, and you can rest here. You can even bring your hands down a little bit so that you come into a bit more of an inversion. I can feel a really good stretch down my hamstrings here. And all the same movements apply. The breastbone lifted, the core engaged, the external rotation of the arms. And there you have it. Thank you for joining me today. Out of breath. Downward dog. It is actually tiring. Just doing nothing can be tiring. So that's what I was saying. It's an incredibly good pose to build up strength. If you can do that every day, initially you might come into it and be like, that is the most uncomfortable thing I have ever attempted. But do it gently. Be kind to yourself. Don't look at really contracting the muscles. It's not about that, okay? You don't want to be doing that in yoga. It's more subtle. It's a more subtle energies. You're working with the physical body and the prana underneath. So when I'm talking about lifting, it's gentle lifts. When I'm talking about engaging and lighting up those parts of the body, and I'm talking about a lift, it's doing exactly that as opposed to clenching. I will leave you be. Happy Fridays, happy weekends, stay safe, and I will see you next week.